Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs, and that cringed face you see is Luke Thomas hating the intro, but it's his fault. This is the man, my media mentor, the man who brought me into the hideous world of MMA vlogging. Luke Thomas of MMA Fighting and Serious Radio is our special guest for a nostalgia episode of the MMA Tete-A-Tete, which we can promise Dana White will regard as both disgusting and despicable. I guarantee it.
Yeah, but this time with good reason.
Yes. And Luke, how are you this morning?
Oh, exhausted, old.
Still hyped over those money fights you saw last night? That was some big doings out of Sacramento.
Yeah, I know. It was quite an experience. I could probably tell you 2 fights on the main card at this point. I'm so checked out.
Yeah, the two. All I can remember is there were two pretty cool chokes, two unconsciousness. Betcha Correa beat the bejesus out of Shayna Baszler, and Joe Soto. I wasn't surprised at how well he did, but he made it into the fifth round, so it is what it is. But for anybody who wasn't keeping up, and I bet a lot of you weren't, although anybody who's watching this probably was, being a complete degenerate bath salt user and fan of our shows.
That's the audience we've groomed for ourselves, Nate.
It is indeed. It is indeed. I do hesitate. I sort of have fears that I'm going to pull off the freeway in Florida someday, and I'm going to meet one of our fans, and
he's gonna eat your face.
Exactly. That's and so I'm just kidding about this, guys. If you meet me, don't eat my face. That's. But for those who missed it, ex-UFC bantamweight champ Renan Barão, or as my cable TV company called him, Renan Barryhoo, when they promote the fights on their hold message. He had to pull out of the fight Friday night due to fainting in the bathtub before weigh-ins. Dana White is pissed. They had to substitute former Bellator featherweight champ Joe Soto to fight TJ Dillashaw. So it's a guy some fans are kind of familiar with against a guy they might have forgotten from a couple of years ago in a smaller promotion. Headlining a show that had no depth on the card. First question, Luke, why is the UFC insisting on doing so many events? I mean, the people who analyze their business are telling me that if they did fewer, bigger events, it's more profitable because the expenses are set. It's a couple $1,000,000 for the UFC to run an event. Once they get that out of the way, any pay-per-view over that margin is pure profit. So why would they want to run 12 events that do under 200,000 views, costing $1,000,000 each time out, instead of doing 5 or 6 that do 700,000 views and just rake in the cash?
I don't know. And there's so many competing theories. Some of the better ones say simply to stay busy to keep any other competition that even could potentially be relevant out of the pay-per-view space or any other space for that matter. That's one competing theory. I think the other is that I've heard it both ways. One, the UFC brand is, or the guys who are in charge of the UFC, they know pay-per-view is declining, but so they're not as maybe big believers in the idea of an 800, 900,000 pay-per-view buy rate, but they know they can get 200,000 or 300,000 fairly consistently. There's that. The other one is quite the opposite, that they overestimate their own strength of the brand. Yes, the UFC brand is very strong, strongest brand in the sport by a million miles, but even they aren't quite grasping how difficult this is becoming for customers and other people. I just don't know. I really don't know. And of course, that that actually is from a strategic standpoint. It's actually a separate question from why didn't they necessarily say cancel UFC 177? Why do they run so many pay-per-views a year? A lot of this is already set in stone, and they have to carry it out contractually, or they're going to be burning MSOs, television partners, sponsors, venues. So that's a separate question, but in terms of a strategic vision of what pay-per-view should look like for them, I honestly cannot make heads or tails of this anymore. Because certainly there is a dubious value to running these kinds of shows at this kind of rate.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm afraid that they're falling through a floor. I mean, one of the things like Dave Meltzer has hammered repeatedly about oversaturation is that you don't know you've done it until you've done it. And once you've done it, you've done serious damage to your brand and to interest in your product. I got a scarifying story in the Bloody Elbow comments on one of my last rants the other day from a guy who went to the Calgary show, UFC 149 live. And UFC 149 was the first, I believe the second rematch between Renan Barão and Uriah Faber. that was the card that that put the lie to the maxim that, oh man, it's these cards that you short sell that you don't get excited about in advance. Those are the ones that always deliver the killer action. This was a card nobody was excited about going in, and it did not deliver the action. Canadian fans were chanting refund throughout the main event. This dude said he went with 6 of his buddies who together had not missed a single UFC pay-per-view in like 5 years. They were super stoked when the UFC finally came to Calgary. When they did go, the event was so bad and they felt so disrespected by the various fight cancellations, no refunds, etc., they haven't seen a UFC together since. And that to me, just that's what happens with oversaturation. That's the risk they're playing. They're just turning off fans, and that's a very hard thing to win back.
First of all, let me introduce the third member of the Tete-A-Tete. This is, goddamn, cat.
You're trying to give some screen time to the dog, and the cat wants in there.
I got a fucking zoo going on over here. This is one of my dogs. I have another dog upstairs. What's up, buddy? Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. Okay, get the fuck out of here.
The softer side of Luke Thomas, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, first of all, the one thing that I'm sort of glad about 177 is, and I'm sure, I'm sure there will be other people that will be bitter enders in the last throes of defeat, to borrow the phraseology of Dick Cheney. But 177 sort of basically illustrated that you can't credibly claim there's no such thing as oversaturation anymore. Now, there were lots of people who've already accepted the idea. I've certainly been one of them. You can debate how bad it is. God, fuck, Jesus, cat, get the... I'm gonna fuck these cats. Just please drop me off at the Humane Society, Master Thomas. I'm trying to ruin your life. Please drop me off at the Humane Society. But I mean, the point about there was always people who were denying it and so forth, which is fine. And again, there is room for debate. There is room for what it looks like. There is room for how it affects things in terms of the contours of this discussion, right? Because we don't. Could be benign in some ways. It could be malevolent in others. It's just hard to say what it all means. And I'm okay with that idea. What I'm not okay with the idea any longer of is that there's a debate about whether it exists. I'm not even going to talk about I'm no longer going to even discuss it as if it's something like, well, we just don't know. No, the jury's out, man. It's pretty clear at this point. So that was actually, I think, a benefit to what's happened. In terms of how UFC brass will discuss it, I don't suspect they'll talk about anything negative in their business publicly, big or small. Nor do I expect them to. And again, I'm not of the belief actually that these things are somehow like totally irreversible. I don't believe that either. But I do think that 177 was just super illustrative in the way that other events maybe have been similar to that. But even 174 didn't quite feel like this one,
No, this one had very little interest going in.
But I will say, though, 174, we knew it was going to suck beforehand, and it sucked. The Calgary show was bad, although we didn't think it was going to be that bad. I will say 177's fights were better in retrospect. After the fact, it's like, all right, it was a decent amount of fights, and some fights were actually even pretty good,
Yeah, but the thing is, Zane Simon tried to pull that line on me last night on the 6th round show, and I was like, the problem was there was no significance to any of those fights.
Well, not even just that. People act like a baby was born last night. Having great fights is some sort of miracle. You know what I mean?
They're going to be doing it on
the highest level. It's the highest
on Friday. So
it's the best promoter in the sport. They can with a decent matchmaker when they have 2 very good ones. They can cobble together a card, and not all of them will be good, but it's not like getting them is this unbelievable. This wasn't 166 good by any stretch of the imagination, either from action or significance. Putting together a fight card to have some interesting fights, which by the way, the prelims, except for that one fight, was not. The other 2 were just bad. It's not a miracle. It's not this rare thing. It wasn't a sighting of a rare bald eagle variety or some shit.
No, Insane Clown Posse is not going to be adding a verse to their miracle song about we live in a world where the UFC can present a watchable fight card. It's a
I don't want to underplay it. I don't want to underplay and say it was bad. It wasn't bad. It was good. And again, it's a testament to the UFC that they can put on a good card in this kind of way, even after having the card basically melt down. But just to be fair to everybody here, I just don't want to be like, well, that solves No, I mean, dude, they're capable. They can do this all the time. In and of itself, that's not a special achievement.
Yeah, the biggest problem is it costs $45 to $55, and there's going to be a better fight night for free next Friday. I mean, we don't know about what the quality of those fights is going to be, but any card that's got Jacare Souza rematching Gegard Mousasi, has Alistair Overeem versus Ben Rothwell, it's got Joe Lozon, et cetera, that is clearly a more significant fight card than the one they're asking fans to pay $55 for. And as far as I can gather, the only real reason to have that card next Friday, instead of saving those fights for pay-per-view, was just to fuck with Bellator. They're putting up a Friday night fight card in Connecticut. They're insisting it has nothing to do with Bellator's season debut.
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, I mean, but to me it's like the UFC no longer has the luxury. They need to focus on entertaining and delivering quality product to their fans rather than obsessing about world domination and destroying every possible competitor. I mean, to me that's like the only reason they're having this many pay-per-views is so that nobody else has a pay-per-view window, or to minimize the possible pay-per-view windows from a competitor. And the only reason they're having so many, not the only reason they're having so many shows, I mean, obviously Fox is paying them well to put on a lot of fight cards. But, I mean, when they're doing a fight card just to spite Bellator, and it's like, what, the Bellator debut of Bobby Lashley is that big an existential threat to the UFC? I mean, it's not even an especially great Bellator card. And so, just baffling me, but I want to get to a question. To me, it looks like, I mean, when you've got a pay-per-view on one Saturday that is patently weaker than the Fox Sports 1 show the following Friday, are they making a conscious choice to emphasize the Fox Sports fight nights over the pay-per-views? I mean,
no, not at all. Maybe it appears that way. I definitely don't think that they. Listen, I'll be the first to join you that they could treat pay-per-view more attentively. I am very sympathetic to that argument, but that is not what's happening here in terms of abandonment or anything like that. Remember, the original card had 2 title fights. The title fights are a key component of UFC pay-per-view strategy, at least now. However long that's been the case, maybe up for some debate, but certainly now they've publicly acknowledged as much. They really want to make that a key component of their pay-per-view experience for fans. They've been doing that on Fox too, but I think they're trying to move away from that to the extent possible. So that's one. The second part is it had 2 title fights in the original 177. They had to spread it thin because of the Jones-Cormier injury, but you know that was a clear differentiator from what you're getting on the Fox Sports card. Yes, they are. Like, first of all, the card this Friday is sensational. It's amazing. And it's actually a great night for combat sports fans because it's Bellator 123 and Lion fights on Access TV. So there's really a lot going on. But I am of the belief that this was here's simply the problem for me. And we've discussed this before when it was simply domestic, but now the problem has been compounded, which is, you know, they're trying to serve so many masters. So here stateside, you have the Ultimate Fighter and the various fight night shows, and these, you know, and now they're going to like these mid-major markets: Baltimore, Tulsa, you know, San Antonio, Austin, right, all kinds of places. But so you have all those. So you have the Fox obligation, you have the original pay-per-view obligation, which is still the main revenue driver. Now you have all these huge Fight Pass shows. But when you think about the Fight Pass shows, you can't think of it as sort of one thing. Think about what they're doing. They're trying to break into China. They're trying to revive Japan. They're trying to nurture Ireland. They're trying to develop Mexico. They're trying to break into Latin America. They're trying to get Sweden going. They're trying to get into Germany. I mean, they've been in Germany, but get it going. Trying to get into France. Trying to get into Italy. Russia, still, I'm sure, is somewhere on the radar. South Korea, they've told me, is on the radar. Singapore, they've already been to. Australia, they're already there. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's not that international expansion, separate from all this other stuff, which is a burden to deal with, is a bad idea. But like this all-at-once strategy seems to be just deeply untenable, simply from a logistical challenge, because you just don't have the roster. A premium product cannot be grown at scale, at least not this quickly, right? If you have a premium product that's that core center, the top 10, top 15 guys in each weight class, there's only so many of them, and so you have to add in all this filler to make all the rest of this possible. Now you add in all of that, plus competing with Bellator. Part of this international expansion, at least in the aggressive schedule that they're on, is a function of not having really any competitors for the last few years, neither domestically or abroad. And that's also a testament to their own strength. So I think Mexico is going to be a big win for them, and I'm happy about it. And I think eventually so will Latin America. China, I just don't know. I think if it eventually is a win, it's going to take years. But I guess my point is, you know, the Fight Night card it is better because they're trying to compete with Bellator, and it benefited some from the 176 cancellation. But it's just you get this. That's why you get this inconsistency. It's like, why is this pay-per-view so bad and then this is so good? It's because one, partly luck, they didn't have injuries melt that down, but really it's the way the strategy works. Everything is all over the map. They can't seem to make the tiered system of cards as clean as they'd like.
How do you think they should? Should they have clear demarcations between Fight Pass caliber cards, Fox Sports 1 caliber cards, Fox caliber cards, and pay-per-view caliber cards? I mean, should they divide it up into mini leagues within the UFC? Should there be regional leagues? I mean, should they draw clear lines?
It's not possible. Everyone's like, they should do that, and I've been one of the ones who said it. And the more I thought about it, it is impossible. It's impossible. Between injuries, between who's available. I should say they could do it if they ratcheted down their schedule, right? But on the current schedule, and with the current roster, and with the current rate of attrition for what a fight card looks like after it's built to what it looks like.
Well, what would they need to cut down to? Like, could 6 pay-per-views a year, 4 Fox shows a year, say 12 fight nights a year, another 12 fight pass events? Would that be doable? I mean,
I haven't mapped out that as closely as probably I should to make my argument, but certainly, we're talking a max. And even I don't think it should be that much. An absolute max of 10 pay-per-views. I'm more inclined to 8. 4 Fox shows I think is fine. And the fight night cards in themselves, how you're going to make those different, I don't know. But the problem is, like, Fight Pass cards, I don't know how you're going to do that because those are really feast or famine. So what's happening is, like, most of those cards are just when they went to Ireland, it was like a Cage Warrior show with a real main event, which is fine. It works for them now. I think eventually once those markets mature, that won't work any longer, which is part of my concern. But be that as it may, and then on top of that,
I think a market like Ireland, as long as you've got a hot fighter like Conor McGregor in a market, I think they should just hit it hard, focus on that. I think that while Alexander Gustafsson's a top contender, they should be focusing on Sweden. Like their European efforts, to me, they should go where the fighters are and follow the talent and focus on those markets and let Germany wait. Definitely let Italy and France wait. Russia, I mean, we're about to be in a war with Russia, it seems like. Like, let that market just sit. Let the Chinese market mature when there's some fighting talent. I mean, it seems like they're going to make another run at Japan with a new reality show. But to me, it's just crazy making that they're just running scattershot and trying to do all these different things. Like, what happens to this Mexico expansion if and when Cain Velasquez or Fabricio Verdum get hurt? Like, that's the thing that's killing me, waiting for this UFC 180 card to happen is, like, what are the odds of one of these guys getting hurt or having to pull out of this fight? And then where is that card left? What's left for the Mexican fans that have been sold this heavyweight championship fight, this Ultimate Fighter coaching rivalry? I mean, is there anything the UFC can do to reduce the number of training injuries and weight cutting problems that fighters are having? Is there something going on, or is it just dumb luck?
He said that, and I agree with Dana White that to the extent possible, these fighters need to have a boxing camp, but you got to have boxing money to have a boxing camp. Cain Velasquez has enough money to do that. It's just not in the way everything else is built. Cain Velasquez could quote unquote afford it, but none of his training partners could. Maybe Daniel Cormier, I suppose, and I doubt even Luke Rockhold could really afford it long term. I could be wrong.
And by boxing camp, you mean a camp that's completely built around one fighter, or anybody else he trains with is brought in as a sparring partner who knows their place, that their place is not to hurt the champ, et cetera, et cetera. But then you've got John Jones in there grappling with Alistair Overeem, which I'm no expert, but I could have told Greg Jackson that was a really stupid idea. What are you doing putting the champ in with Alistair Overeem, a notoriously selfish training partner and a bigger fighter? And
yeah, I mean, some of those kinds of things are avoidable, I suppose. But Cain Velasquez has really bad shoulders. Those are hard to ever. I've got one. This one's been repaired surgically. Like, those are hard to ever get right. So I don't know. But the point for me is I want to sort of go back and challenge. I mean, I think if you have a hot fighter, you can run it for a while. But what are you going to do when they're not there? And moreover, I'm of the belief that yes, there are a lot of these markets that are just pining badly for a UFC product, and that's where UFC should go. Like Ireland, like Mexico, like those are the places you should really be hitting. But I don't think it's true that you can forever bring a card there where you got one fight and a co-main event and then just regional guys that are clearly not on par with the rest of the program, and the fans will just accept this over there forever.
Oh,
Not,
definitely.
not true at all. And what's the problem? It's like, what are you going to do when these markets turn to that? Because it's coming. It's the same thing here. Everyone's like, well, fighters are better than ever. How come no one talks about that? It's like, dude, we all talk about that. Like Chris Weidman. I mean, can you go back and watch like a UFC Unleashed from like the Matt Hughes era? You know, Chris Weidman. I mean, it's a different weight class, but I just mean you think about how good he is. He would destroy.
Yeah,
those.
think what he would have done to Rich Franklin or Evan Tanner back in the day.
But quickly here, the point I'm trying to make is so have fan expectations risen concurrently, right? So everyone knows what to expect at a much deeper level now as a consumer and watcher, and that will happen in New Zealand. That will happen. I mean, it's probably going to be a long time before it happens in China, but certainly other places where there is some intrigue about the sport. You know, I don't know. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just have some questions about it.
I even have a question as to whether or not higher fighter quality doesn't hurt the appeal of the sport, because you know the eras where there was the most frisson of the sport for fans were some of the worst eras ever. I mean, the Hoist Gracie era, that was a compelling product to people who had no idea what they were seeing. You know, you had 4 refrigerator repairman from Muncie, Indiana, going up against, you know, one guy from the Lions Den and one jiu-jitsu expert, and it was just compelling, incredibly compelling television, because there were such clear victories, and it was easy to tell, you know, who the better fighter was. You got to see guys show off their technique, and now you have, you know, sometimes you have guys who have really exciting styles that just, you know, they're not going to make it against the murderer's row of wrestle boxers they're going to be fed to in the UFC. I mean, it seemed like Strikeforce, at least in the Scott Coker days, had a knack for building somebody up like Nick Diaz, who's a stylistically limited fighter, you could argue, and yet they made a very successful run out of a guy that the UFC had basically run out of the promotion by setting him up against a bunch of Sean Shirks and you know, Caro Parisian and Diego Sanchez and guys who wrestle mugged him. And so, I mean, is there something going on where once fighters achieve a certain level of skill, it's a less entertaining product? Is that a devil's bargain?
I don't believe that. I think the best fights are the ones with the highest level of skill. But what you're talking about is when you have this like initial Hoist Gracie moment. First of all, it's just lightning in the bottle. You can't get that back. Then I'd also argue that it was also, yes, there were beatdowns. But there were beatdowns because it was revelatory about, in the case of Hoist Gracie, say, the power of jiu-jitsu. You're like, oh my God, this stuff works. It's real. You know, I can see that. This is, you know, I wouldn't call it science, but it's evidence. You know, it's evidence of the fact that in the right hands with the right development, this guy can do that to that guy. That's crazy. And so it was a demonstration of skill. It was also, to your point, a demonstration of skill differential. So I do agree with that, and it's true to some extent where like you'll watch a Cage Warriors card or the undercard of some of these Fight Pass cards, and guys are like, can't believe all these critics, all these cynics, they were poo-pooing this card. Man, it had 3 first-round finishes. Yeah, because it was a regional card. That's what happens on regional cards. And it's hilarious to me. It's like MMA fans will not watch a regional card, but you put 2 UFC fights on the top of it, put a UFC branding on it, all of a sudden, can't believe all these critics poo-pooed that card. It's like, dude, are you joking with me? Go watch Cage Warriors cards, man. They're at least as good as those Fight Pass cards, except obviously they can't compete on the main event and co-main event level, and don't try to. But you know, that was hilarious to me. But so I'm not of the belief, though. I think that there's a weird pocket in the middle where where the parity can slow down action. But I think on balance that it's the top of the food chain. Your Machitas, your Weidmans, your GSPs, your Silvas, your Velasquezes. Those are the guys that promotionally can move the needle. It's the highest level of the sport. It's a brand differentiator. It's the premium side of the sport. I think that's the direction you solely focus on, rather than getting, gee, let's get the top 20 and top 25, you know, middleweights to, you know, be on this Fox Sports 1 card. It's like, I don't think that's particularly compelling narrative.
All right, any final points you want to address about the UFC 177 meltdown? Quick prediction, do you think that they make some obvious adjustments? Like after UFC 175, you saw them change their tune vis-a-vis booking Ronda Rousey. Like after Ronda Rousey destroyed Alexis Davis, and there was a lot of groaning from like, who cares? She's just beating a bunch of cans. Then they immediately sign Holly Holm. They ramp up the negotiations with Gina Carano. They express an openness to bringing back Chris Cyborg. What do you think? Do you think they make some obvious adjustments here? Are we going to hear some announcements of a pared back pay-per-view schedule, or do you think that they just full guns, full speed ahead down the torpedoes?
I don't know. I'll give them credit. They keep their cards close to the vest. It's really hard to read them. I've talked to other executives in the sport, some that used to work at Zuffa, and they thought after 174 that would certainly precipitate change. I do think they intentionally tried to stack 178 as a consequence. I think that was the right move. Obviously, it didn't work out because of the injury thing. But that's one of those situations where you can legitimately say that was not their fault. They cannot control what John Jones does at Greg Jackson's at a molecular level. They stacked a card. They did what they could. I will completely give them a mulligan in that case. I don't know, dude. I really don't know. I thought they would have made changes long ago, But they don't care what I think, which is fine, nor should they. I mean, I'm talking to you on a webcam in my basement with eye boogers on as my.
And we've got 39 live viewers, man. 39 live viewers, Luke.
Yeah. But I just mean sort of stepping back and trying to assess it and make sense of it. There's some obvious gaps, so from our vantage point, there's some obvious gaps in logic, and I don't know what they're going to do. But to me, if they came out next year and they said we're going to do fewer pay-per-views and keep the rest of our schedule, I think here's what I would say. I'll think any change they'll make will be, at least for the next year or two, incremental. I don't think they would make any substantive change until things got consistently really bad, and they may never do that,
Interesting. Well, Luke, thanks very much for joining us. And where can people find you and hear more pearls of your wisdom?
Well, such as they are, phony pearls. You can find them at MMAfighting.com, and I promise I'll be more coherent.
And your show Promotional Malpractice is now on iTunes
and Stitcher and Podkicker and everything else. So if you have any kind of mobile device or iTunes, subscribe. I really appreciate it.
All right, and that is Luke Thomas. He's at SBN Luke Thomas on Twitter. I am at Kid Nate on Twitter. Subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube. Read me at BloodyElbow.com. And Eugene will be back tomorrow with the Knuckle Up, and we will have a whole feast of Care Don't Cares and MMA vivisections for the big fight weekend coming up. So we're going to have a lot of action. So adios, MMA aficionados. We'll see you next time.